and I'm a professor of neurobiology and ophthalmology at Stanford School of Medicine. Today, my guest is Dr. Alia Crum. Dr. Crum is a tenured professor of psychology at Stanford University and the founder and director of the Stanford Mind and Body Lab. Her work focuses on mindsets, how what we think and what we believe shapes the way that our physiology, our biology, reacts to things like what we eat, or stress, or exercise. Indeed, as you will soon learn from my discussion with Dr. Crum, what you believe about the nutritional content of your food changes the way that food impacts your brain and body to a remarkable degree. And the same is true for mindsets about exercise and stress and even medication. For instance, recent work from Dr. Crum's laboratory shows that what we believe about the side effect profiles of different drug treatments or different behavioral treatments has a profound impact on how quickly those treatments work and the effectiveness of those treatments. I just want to mention one particular study that just came out from a graduate student in Dr. Crum's laboratory, Lauren Howe, Howe, showed that how kids react to a treatment for peanut allergies can be profoundly shaped by whether or not those kids were educated about the side effects of the treatment, such that if they learned that the side effects were a byproduct of a treatment that would help them, and they learned a little bit about why those side effects arose and that the side effects might even help them en route to overcoming their peanut allergy, had an enormous impact on how quickly they moved through the treatment and indeed how much they suffered, or in this case did not suffer, from those side effects. And that is but one example that you will learn about today as we discuss what mindsets are, the number of different mindsets that exist, and how we can adopt mindsets that make us more adaptive, more effective, allow us to suffer less, and to perform better in all aspects of life. I personally find the work of Dr. Alia Crum to be among the most important work being done in the fields of biology and psychology and the interface of mind-body. Everything that she's done up until now and published, and indeed the work that she continues to do, has shaped everything within my daily routines, within my work routines, within my athletic routines. And we probably shouldn't be surprised by the fact that Dr. Crum works on all these things. She was not only an incredibly accomplished tenured research professor, she's also a clinical psychologist, and she was also a Division I athlete and an elite gymnast at one period in her life. So she really walks the walk in terms of understanding what mindsets are and applying them in different aspects of life. I'm sure you're going to learn a ton from this conversation, as did I, and come away with many, many actionable items that you can apply in your own life. In fact, as we march into today's conversation, you might want to just put in the back of your mind the question, what is my mindset about blank? So for instance, ask yourself, what is my mindset about stress? What is my mindset about food? What is my mindset about exercise? What is my mindset about relationships of different kinds? Because in doing that, you'll be in a great position to extract the best of the information that Dr. Crum presents, and indeed to adapt those mindsets in the way that is going to be most beneficial for you. Before we begin, I'd like to emphasize that this podcast is separate from my teaching and research roles at Stanford. It is, however, part of my desire and effort to bring zero cost to consumer information about science and science-related tools to the general public. In keeping with that theme, I'd like to thank the sponsors of today's podcast. Our first sponsor is Thesis. Thesis makes custom nootropics that are ideal for the particular brain states that you want to be in. The term nootropic means smart drug, and it is not a term that I like because there's no such thing as a universally useful smart drug. The reason for that is that our brain can be creative, we can be focused, we can be good at task switching, and each of those different things, creativity, focus, and task switching, involves different neurochemicals in different states of mind and body. So the notion that there's one best nootropic is just not accurate. There's just no way that could possibly be. Thesis understands this, and for that reason designs custom nootropics that are designed to bring your brain and body into the states that you want and that are specifically designed to your neurochemistry. They use only the highest quality ingredients, many of which I've talked about before on the podcast. Things like DHA, ginkgo biloba, phosphatidylserine, alpha-GPC is one that I particularly like and is in several of the formulations that are customized for me. However, ginkgo biloba, which has a lot of research to support it and is well tolerated by many people, doesn't work well for me. It actually gives me headaches. So that one is not included in any of the custom formulations that Thesis has made particularly for me. Thesis has this tremendous asset, which is that they give you the ability to try several different blends over the course of a month and discover which nootropics work best for your unique brain chemistry and genetics. So the formulas that work for me may not be the best ones for you and vice versa. But in a short period of time, you can dial in the exact nootropic formulas for the states of mind and body that you want to be in. I've been using Thesis for close to 6 months now, and I can confidently say that their nootropics have been a total game changer. I love the motivation formula. I also like the energy formula. I use those for different things, it turns out, but I love those. And I use their logic formula and their clarity formula that they've customized for me. In addition to their personalization, Thesis takes it a step further. They'll offer you a free consultation with a brain coach to help optimize your experience with the nootropics and dial in the best formulas for you. To get your own personalized nootropic starter kit, go online to takethesis.com/Huberman, take their brief 3-minute quiz, and Thesis will send you 4 different formulas to try in your first month. That's takethesis.com/Huberman and use the code Huberman at checkout to get 10% off your first box. Today's episode is also brought to us by Roka. Roka makes eyeglasses and sunglasses that are of the absolute highest quality. I've spent a lifetime working on the visual system, and I can tell you that our visual system has to contend with a huge number of different challenges, not the least of which is when we go from a very bright sunny spot outside into the shade, our visual system has to adapt in order for us to continue to see clearly. Many sunglasses out there just don't allow that adaptation to occur in a seamless way. Roka eyeglasses and sunglasses are designed with all of the biology of the visual system in mind so that you always see things with crystal clarity no matter what environment you're in. They also have a terrific aesthetic. They have many, many different styles to choose from. So their eyeglasses can be worn to dinner or out to lunch or to work. Their sunglasses can be worn essentially anywhere. They're very stylish and they were designed for performance. They won't slip off your face if you get sweaty. Indeed, you can wear them while running or while cycling. They're really terrific. They're really versatile. If you'd like to try Roka glasses, go to Roka, that's ROKA.com, and enter the code Huberman to save 20% off your first order. Again, that's Roka, ROKA.com, and enter the code Huberman at checkout. Today's episode is also brought to us by Inside Tracker. Inside Tracker is a personalized nutrition platform that analyzes data from your blood and DNA to help you better meet your immediate and long-term health goals. Now, I've long been a believer in getting regular blood work done for the simple reason that many of the things that impact your immediate and long-term health can only be assessed from a quality blood test. And nowadays, with the advent of modern DNA tests, you can also get a window into how your genes are impacting your health in the short and long term and the various things that you should do in order to adjust your health in the right direction. Now, one of the major issues with a lot of blood tests and DNA tests out there is you get numbers back and you learn whether or not your lipids or your hormones, et cetera, are within the proper range or not. But there aren't a lot of directives about what to do with that information. Inside Tracker makes all of that very easy. They have a personalized dashboard that allows you to, of course, see the numbers that come back to you and to make various changes in nutrition, various changes in exercise, various changes in all sorts of lifestyle factors that can bring those numbers into range. And so if you have a particular value for a particular metabolic factor or hormone or so forth, you click on that and it will actually bring up the full menu of things that you can do in order to adjust that factor into the ranges that you like, all based on quality peer-reviewed research. If you'd like to try Inside Tracker, you can visit insidetracker.com/Huberman to get 25% off any of Inside Tracker's plans. Just use the code Huberman at checkout. And now, my conversation with Dr. Alia Crum. Well, great to have you here.
Great to be here.
Yeah. For the record, it's Alia Crum, but you go by Ali, correct?
That is correct.
All right. Dr. Alia Crum.
Or just Ali.
Okay. Great. Well, I've been looking forward to talking to you for a long time. Just to start off, you've talked a lot and worked a lot on the science of mindsets. Could you define for us what is a mindset and what sort of purpose does it serve?
Of course. Yeah. Mindsets have been described or defined in a lot of ways. We define mindsets as core beliefs or assumptions that we have about a domain or category of things that orient us to a particular set of expectations, explanations, and goals. So that's kind of jargony. I can distill it down for you. So mindsets are an assumption that you make about a domain. So take stress, for example, the nature of stress. What's your sort of core belief about that? And mindsets that we've studied about stress are, do you view stress as enhancing, good for you, or do you view it as debilitating and bad for you? Those mindsets, those core beliefs orient our thinking. They change what we expect will happen to us when we're stressed, how we explain the occurrences that happen or unfold when we're stressed, and also change our motivation for what we engage in when we're stressed. So we have mindsets about many things, mindsets about stress, mindsets about intelligence, as Carol Dweck's work has shown, mindsets about food, mindsets about medicine, you name it. It's sort of distilling down those core assumptions that really shape and orient our thinking and action.
I've heard you say before that mindsets simplify life in some way by constraining the number of things that we have to consider. And it sounds to me like we can have mindsets about many things, as you said. What are some different mindsets? I think many people are familiar with our colleague Carol Dweck's notion of growth mindset, that if we're not proficient at something, that we should think about not being proficient yet, that we are on some path to proficiency. But what are some examples of mindsets, and how early do these get laid down, or do we learn them from our parents? Maybe if you could just flesh it out a bit for us in terms of what you've observed in your own science or your own life even.
Yeah, sure. So I think it's important with Carol Dweck's work. A lot of people kind of get focused on growth motivation and all these things, but her work really originated from thinking about what she called as implicit theories or core beliefs about the nature of intelligence or ability. Right. So do you believe that your baseline levels of intelligence or your abilities are fixed, static, set throughout the rest of your life? Or do you believe that they can grow and change? Now, those are oversimplified generalizations about the nature of intelligence. And the reality is, as it always is, complex, and it's a bit of both, and it's all these things. But as humans, we need these simplifying systems to help us understand a complex reality. So those assumptions that we jump to, oh, intelligence is fixed or intelligence is malleable, they help us to simplify this complex reality, but they're not inconsequential, right? They matter in shaping our motivation. And as she has shown, if you have the mindset that intelligence is malleable, you're motivated to work harder to grow your intelligence. If you have a setback in your learning, you think, okay, there's something there that I can grow and learn and build from. If you have the mindset that it's fixed, why work harder at math if you don't think you're good at it? So, in retrospect, it's pretty clear how these mindsets can affect our motivation. What our work has aimed to do is to expand the range of mindsets that we are studying, focused on, and also understand and expand the range of effects that they have. So by and large, we've focused on mindsets in the domain of health and health behaviors. So I mentioned, mindsets about stress. We've also looked at mindsets about food and healthy eating. So do you have the mindset that foods that are good for you, healthy foods, are disgusting and depriving? Or do you have the mindset that healthy foods are indulgent and delicious? Now, it could be a variety of different foods. You might have different thoughts about different healthy foods, but generally people, at least in our culture in the West, have this view that stress is debilitating, healthy foods are disgusting and depriving. And those mindsets, whether or not they're true or false, right or wrong, they have an impact. And they have an impact not just through the motivational mechanisms that Dweck and others have studied, but as our lab has started to reveal, they also shape physiological mechanisms by changing what our bodies prioritize and prepare to do. So those are just two examples, mindsets about stress, mindsets about food. We've looked at mindsets about exercise. Do you feel like you're getting enough? Or do you feel like you're getting an insufficient amount to get the health benefits you're seeking? Mindsets about illness. Do you view cancer as an unmitigated catastrophe? Or do you view cancer as manageable or perhaps even an opportunity? We've looked at mindsets about symptoms and side effects. Do you view side effects as, a sign that the treatment is harmful? Or do you view side effects as a sign that the treatment is working? Again, these are sort of core beliefs or assumptions you have about these domains or categories, but they matter because they're synthesizing and simplifying the way we're thinking, but they're also shaping what we're paying attention to, what we're motivated to do, and potentially even how our bodies respond.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about this notion of how the mindset shaping how our bodies respond. And maybe as an example of this, if you could share with us this now famous study that you've done with a milkshake study, if you wouldn't mind sharing the major contours of that study and the results, because I think they're extremely impressive and they really speak to this interplay between mindset and physiology.
Certainly. Yeah, this was a study that I ran as a graduate student at Yale University. I was working with Kelly Brownell and Peter Salovey. Peter Salovey had done a lot of work on really coining the term emotional intelligence.
He's now the president of Yale,
He's now
right?
the president of Yale, yes.
So he's done well.
He's done well for himself and for the university and society. And Kelly Brownell, who was doing a lot of research on food and obesity. And I had come in doing some previous work on mindsets about exercise and placebo effects in exercise, and was in this sort of food domain and this emotions and food domain. And it really occurred to me that there was a very simple question that hadn't been probed yet. And that was, do our beliefs about what we're eating change our body's physiological response to that food, holding constant the objective nutrients of that thing? So that question might sound outrageous at first, but it's really not outrageous if you're coming from a place of having studied in depth placebo effects. So placebo effects are in medicine at least, are this sort of robust demonstration in which simply taking a sugar pill, taking nothing, under the impression that it's a real medication that might relieve your asthma, reduce your blood pressure, boost your immune system, can lead to those physiological effects, even though there's no objective nutrients. And we have more evidence on placebo effects than we have for any other drug because of the clinical trial process in which all new drugs and medications are required to outperform a placebo effect. So we have a lot of data on the placebo effect. Now, we can get nuanced there. We don't have a lot of data comparing the placebo effect to doing nothing, which is important for distilling mindset effects or belief effects from sort of natural occurring changes in the body. But anyways, going back to this question, it was like, all right, we've moved from, medications solving our health crises to behavioral medicine solving our health crises, increase people's exercise, get them to eat better. To what degree are these things influenced by our mindsets or beliefs about them? So to test this question, we ran a seemingly simple study. This was done at the Yale Center for Clinical and Translational Research. And we brought people into our lab under the impression that we were designing different milkshakes with vastly different metabolic concentrations, nutrient concentrations, that were designed to meet different metabolic needs of the patrons of the hospital, right? So you're going to come in, you're going to taste these milkshakes, and we're going to measure your body's physiological response to them. This was a within subjects design, so it was the same people consuming 2 different milkshakes, 2 different time points separated by a week. And at one time point, they were told that they were consuming this really high-fat, high-caloric, indulgent milkshake. It was like 620 calorie, super high fat and sugar. The other time point, they were told that it was a low fat, low calorie, sensible sort of diet shake. In reality, it was the exact same shake. It was right in the middle. It was like 300 calories, moderate amount of fats and sugars. And we were measuring their body's gut peptide response to this shake. And in particular, we were looking at the hormone ghrelin. So as you know, ghrelin, hunger, medical experts call it the hunger hormone, rises in ghrelin, seek out food, and then theoretically, in proportion to the amount of calories you consume, ghrelin levels drop, signaling to the brain, okay, you don't need to eat so much anymore, you can stop eating, and also revving up the metabolism to burn the nutrients that were just ingested. What we found in this study was that when people thought they were consuming the high-fat, high-calorie, indulgent milkshake, in response to the shake, their ghrelin levels dropped at a 3-fold rate stronger than when they thought they were consuming the sensible shake. So essentially, their bodies responded as if they had consumed more food, even though it was the exact same shake at both time points. So this was really, interesting and important for 2 reasons, really. One was that it was, to my knowledge, one of the first studies to show any effects of just believing that you're eating something different on your physiology. Lots of studies have shown that believing you're eating different things changes your taste, and even your satisfaction and fullness after. But this shows that it has a metabolic or a physiological component. But the second piece was really important as well, and especially for me, this was one study that really transformed the way I think about how I approach eating, and that was the manner in which it affected our physiology was somewhat counterintuitive. So I had gone in thinking the better mindset to be in when you eat is that you're eating healthy, right? Like, it just makes sense. Like placebo effects, think you're healthy, you'll be healthy, But that was a far too simplistic way of thinking about it. And in fact, it was the exact opposite, because thinking that they were eating, when these participants thought they were eating sensibly, their bodies left them still feeling physiologically hungry, right? Not satiated, which could potentially be corresponding to slower metabolism and so forth. So if you're in the interest of maintaining or losing weight, what's the best mindset to be in? It's to be in a mindset that you're eating indulgently, that you're having enough food, that you're getting enough. And at least in that study, we showed that has a more adaptive effect on ghrelin responses.
So interesting. And especially interesting to me as a neuroscientist who has worked on aspects of the nervous system that are involved in conscious perception, like vision and motion and color perception and so forth. But also our lab has worked and is increasingly working on autonomic functions that are below our conscious detection. Mm-hmm. In this case, a lie about how much something these milkshakes contain affected a subconscious process, because I have to imagine that the ghrelin pathway is not one that I can decide, this particular piece of chocolate is going to really reduce my ghrelin because it's very nutrient rich, as opposed to one, if you told me that a different piece of chocolate, for instance, is low calorie or sugar-free chocolate or something of that sort. The ghrelin pathway, however, it seems, based on your data, that the ghrelin pathway is susceptible to thoughts, which is incredible. But then again, there must be crossover between conscious thought and these subconscious or kind of autonomic pathways. So it's really remarkable. It raises a question that I just have to ask, because increasingly so I'm involved in online discussions and social media. And one of the most barbed wire topics out there, and that's being generous, is this topic of which diet or nutrients are best. You've got people who are strictly plant-based. You've got people who are omnivores. You've got people who are carnivores. You have every variation. You have intermittent fasting, also called time-restricted feeding. And it seems like once a group kind of plugs into a particular mode of eating that they feel works for them, for whatever reason, energy-wise, mentally, maybe they're looking at their blood profiles, maybe they're not. But once they feel that it sort of it works for them, each camp seems to tout all the health benefits and how great they feel. Could it be that mindset effects are involved there, that people are finding the nutritional program that they feel brings them the most enrichment of life, but also nutrients, and that their health really is shifting in a positive direction, but not necessarily because of the food constituents, but because of the community and the ideas and the reinforcement?
Yeah, and the belief that this is the right way of doing something. I think 100%, 100% it has something to contribute. I'm not going to weigh in on the debate, which is better. What I will most certainly weigh in on is the notion that, look, going back to the placebo effect, right? We have an outdated understanding of what that is, which is based on this randomized control trial. You compare a drug to a placebo. If the drug works better than the placebo, you say, great, the drug works. If the drug doesn't outperform the placebo, you say the drug doesn't work. That's really oversimplified. It's a good test for the specific efficacy of the drug. It's not a good test for understanding the total impact of that drug. Because in the reality of things, if a drug outperforms a placebo, then, you start prescribing it. But the reality is that the total effect of that drug is a combined product of the specific chemical, attributes of that drug and whatever's going on in the placebo effect, which is, at least from our perspective, it's beliefs, it's social context, and it's your body's natural ability to respond to something. So, that's in the placebo effect example. The same is true for everything we do or consume. So when it comes to what diet you're eating, both are true. It does matter what it is, and it matters what you think about that diet and what others around you and in our culture think about that diet, because those social contexts inform our mindsets. Our mindsets interact with our physiology in ways that produce outcomes that are really important. So let's not get dualistic and say, it's either all in the mind or not in the mind. Let's also not be unnecessarily combative and say, it should be all plant-based or, keto or whatever. It's all of those things are a combined product of what you're actually doing and what you're thinking about. If you believe in it, if you don't, if you're skeptical, or, in some cases, you think you should be eating a certain way and then you don't live up to that, it might have even an adverse effect because of the stress and the anxiety associated with that.
Very interesting. Along the lines of belief effects, can we call these belief effects
or
mindsets?
Yeah.
Is there a difference between these, what I'm calling belief effects, and placebo effects? I mean, are placebo effects distinctly different from mindset effects, or are they more or less the same thing?
They're related. So I think placebo effects, maybe should be reserved for the, conditions in which you're actually taking a placebo, which is an inactive substance. When you get out of that sort of placebo versus drug, realm, and you start looking at, placebo effects, I use quotes with my hands here, in behavioral health, the term kind of becomes confusing because you're not, in the milkshake study, we didn't give people a placebo milkshake, right? We just changed what they believed about it. So how I like to think about it is that placebo effects, as they're traditionally construed, are made up of three things. It's the social context, mindsets or beliefs, and the natural physiological processes in the brain and body that can produce the outcomes. And so we could just call them belief effects because the beliefs are triggering the physiological processes and the beliefs are shaped by the social context. Does that make sense?
It makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a paper a year or two ago published in Science magazine about brain regions involved in psychogenic fever. That if people, or you can actually do this in animal models too, think that they're sick, you get a genuine 1 to 3 degree increase in body temperature, 1 to 3 degrees Fahrenheit increase in body temperature. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
And I guess plays into, symptomology generally. So I'm a believer in belief effects.
Well, it's also, and I would just say that, the term that we use in our field is nocebo effect for that, which is sort of the placebo's ugly stepsister. It's when negative beliefs cause negative consequences. So you are told you will have, it's very well demonstrated that when people are told about certain side effects, they're far more likely to experience those side effects. When people think that they're sick or going to get sick, sometimes that can create, the physiological symptoms. And, there's various debates that it's not only that physiology changes, it's also that your attention changes. So we're experiencing things like fatigue and headache and upset stomach all the time. And then when you take a drug and somebody says you're going to feel fatigue and headache, you start noticing that you're tired and have headaches and attribute it to the drug. So some of the mechanisms are attention, and some of them are real changes in physiology.
I'd love for you to tell us about the hotel workers study.
Yeah, sure.
I know you get asked these questions all the time, but I find these results also amazing.
Yeah, no, I think that this is a really good example of this phenomenon, right? That the total effect of anything is a combined product of what you're doing and what you think about what you're doing. So this was a study that I ran with Ellen Langer way back when I was an undergrad, actually. We started this study. Ellen Langer's a professor of psychology at Harvard, and she's done a lot of really fascinating work on her flavor of mindfulness, which is distinct from a more, Eastern Buddhist sort of mindfulness-based work. And she actually was the one who said to me originally, I was an athlete at the time. I was an ice hockey player, and I was training constantly. And one day, I'll never forget it, she said, the benefit of exercise is just a placebo, right? And I was like, well, that's outrageous. Ellen's known for saying very provocative, but also very wise things. And that statement really got me thinking about that. So we designed this study together, and that was to look at, how would you study if the benefits of exercise were a placebo? How would you even test that? Because, what does it mean to give a placebo exercise? So we sort of flipped it on its head, and we found a group of people who were getting a lot of exercise, but weren't aware of it, that they were, right? So we settled on a group of hotel housekeepers. So these were women working in hotels who were on their feet all day long, pushing carts, changing linens, climbing stairs, cleaning bathrooms, vacuuming. It was clear that they were getting above and beyond at least the Surgeon General's requirements at that time, which were to accumulate 30 minutes of moderate physical activity per day. But what was interesting was when we went in and surveyed them and asked them, hey, how much exercise do you think you're getting? A third of them said 0. Like, I don't get any exercise. And the average response was like a 3 on a scale of 0 to 10. So it's clear that even though these women were active, they didn't have that mindset, right? They had the mindset that their work was just work, hard, maybe thankless work that led them to feel tired and in pain at the end of the day, but not that it was good for them, that it was good exercise. So what we did was we took these women and we randomized them into 2 groups, and we told half of them that their work was good exercise. In this case, it was true, factual information. We oriented them to the Surgeon General's guidelines. We oriented them to the benefits that they should be receiving. And then we had measured them previously on their physiological metrics like weight and body fat and blood pressure. And we came back 4 weeks later and we tested them again. And what we found was that these women, even though they hadn't changed anything in their behavior, at least that was detectable to us, they didn't work more rooms, they didn't start doing pull-ups or push-ups in between cleaning hotel rooms as far as I'm concerned. They didn't report any changes in their diet, but they had benefits to their health. So they lost weight, they decreased their systolic blood pressure by about 10 points on average, and they started feeling better about themselves, their bodies, and their work, not surprisingly.
That's amazing. How should we conceptualize that result in light of all of our efforts to get more out of exercise, right? Because earlier you mentioned it from the milkshake study and our perceptions about nutrient density that, it's a little bit, the right message is actually a little bit counterintuitive, that if you think, oh, this is very low calorie, nutrient sparse, then it's good for me in the context of losing weight, for instance. But it turns out the opposite is true because, as you told us, the body responds differently when you think something is nutrient dense and can actually suppress hunger more. So in light of this result, if I were to say, okay, my current understanding of the literature is that getting somewhere between 150 and 180 minutes per week of cardiovascular exercise is probably a good idea for most people. Mm-hmm. If I tell myself that it's not just a good idea, but that it's extremely effective in lowering my blood pressure and maintaining healthy weight, et cetera, according to these results, it will have an enhanced effect on those metrics. Is that right?
Definitely. So this is a really important point because what this reveals is that we have to be more thoughtful in how we go about motivating people to exercise or teaching people about the benefits. Our current approach is just to basically tell people writ large, here's what you need to get. Here's what you need to get good for, to get enough benefits to receive enough exercise to receive the health benefits. The problem with that approach is that most people aren't meeting those benefits yet, or aren't meeting those requirements yet. And the risk with that is that, the intention with that is to motivate them because, public health officials think, well, if I just tell people you need to get more exercise because it's good for you, they'll do it. We know now that that doesn't work, that these guidelines are not motivational. They don't change our behavior. And what our work adds to that is that not only is it not motivational, it also creates potentially a mindset that, makes people worse off than they were without knowing about the guidelines. So again, it's tricky. I'm not saying that mindset is everything. Certainly exercise is good for us and use is helpful for us. It's one of the things we have the best data on. So I'm not saying, exercise is all a placebo. What I am saying is that we need to be more mindful about how do we motivate people to exercise, but how do we help people to actually reap the benefits of the exercise they are already doing? Now, Octavia Zart, who was a grad student in my lab, ran a number of interesting studies along these lines. One in which she looked at 3 nationally representative data sets, which had this interesting question in them, which was, how much exercise do you get relative to others? Do you get about the same, a little more, a lot more? Do you get a little less or a lot less, right? So, the audience, your listeners, you could all answer this. And then in these data sets, what she did was she had, pulled from data that tracked death rates over the next 21 years. And a couple interesting things revealed themselves. One was that the correlations between these perceptions of exercise relative to others and people's actual exercise as measured through accelerometer data, as well as more rigorous sort of what did you do today kind of data, those don't correlate much at all.
People lie.
Well, people lie, but
or
also
misperceive.
They misperceive. Or who's to say it's misperceiving? There's just, everything's relative, right? I used to do triathlons very seriously. So if you were to ask me now, I feel like I'm totally inactive, right? Because I'm not doing anything near what I used to. And if that's my focus set, right, I feel like I'm not exercising much. But if I think about, compared to other people, given what I know about, national representative statistics, then I could feel like, I'm getting a lot, right? So you can see how these perceptions are decoupled from objective reality. And what we found in these studies is that one question mattered, in some cases more than objective activity, but in all cases controlling for objective activity and predicting death rates. And in one of the samples, it was a 71% higher risk of death rate, if people rated themselves as feeling like they were getting less activity than others.
Wow.
So
that's a big deal.
It's a big deal. And again, that study is cross-sectional, longitudinal. It was not experimental. But combined, these really sort of, coalesce to say, hey, this is important too, right? Like, let's figure out ways to be active and get people active, but let's also not make people feel horrible about themselves when they're not getting enough. And going back to the hotel study, again, I mentioned that I did that at a time when I was a Division I ice hockey player at the time. We were training all the time, and I was in an unhealthy mindset about that. I never felt like I was getting enough. I would, come off a 2-hour practice into a weightlifting session, and then I would get on the elliptical for 30 minutes because I thought I had to do that also. My teammates who were with me at the time could attest to that. And so that study was really helpful for me to realize that I needed to pay attention not just to what I was doing, but also take care of my mindset about that. And I think the essence is, how do you get people to feel like they're getting enough? It's a sense of enoughness that really matters.
Yeah, I can see the dilemma, because you don't want people thinking that that exercise and its positive effects are so potent that they can get away with a 3-minute walk each day and that they're good,
right? Because
most likely they are not. But again, you don't want them to be so back on their heels psychologically that they don't even do that, or that they never exceed that by very much. But it seems like the message from the milkshake study and what we're talking about now in terms of exercise would be to really communicate to the general public that food has a potency. Even healthy foods have a potency to give us energy, to fuel our immune system and endocrine system, et cetera. And that exercise has a remarkable potency, and that potency can be enhanced by believing in or understanding that potency.
Exactly.
Is that an accurate way to state it?
Total. That's exactly right. And that's where I really feel like we need to push. And what I try to do in our research is to not just show, mindset matters, isn't that interesting? But it's both matter, right? Both exercise and what you think about it matter. Both what you eat and how you think about what you eat matter. And so we really, as individuals and as a society, need to work on, what is the right way to cultivate both behaviors and mindsets about those behaviors that serve us. And in the food context, this, again, that milkshake study really changed me on a personal level, because I had been somebody who was constantly trying to restrain my eating, right? I wanted to maintain or, lose weight, look fit. And so I was like, well, I should diet. I should have low calorie, low carb, low this, low that. But what that was doing was putting me into this constant mindset of restraint. And what that study suggested was that mindset was potentially counteracting any benefit, right? Or any objective effects of the restrained diet. Because my brain was saying, okay, you're restraining. Maybe my body was, responding to that. But the brain was also saying, eat more food, stay hungry because you need to survive. And so the answer isn't, oh, we'll throw everything into the wind and just drink indulgent milkshakes all day long. The answer is eat healthy foods, right? Based on the latest science and what we know to be true about nutrients and our body's response to them. But try to do so in a mindset of indulgence, a mindset of satisfaction, a mindset of enjoyment, right? That is really the trick. And that's what I at least try to do in my own life.
I love that. And as I get more involved in kind of public-facing health communications, this comes up again and again. How should we conceptualize our behavior? How should we think about all these options that are offered to us? And I'm excited that the potency of mindsets are coming through again and again. So I have a question about this. I don't know if this study has ever been done, but a lot of these mindset effects are something that years ago I felt I did vis-a-vis sleep, because I was in graduate school and as a postdoc, and even as an undergraduate, I had so much work to do that I decided I would sleep when I was dead, in quotes. Not a good idea from what we know. However, I found that a couple nights of minimal sleep or even an all-nighter, and I could do pretty well. Eventually, it would catch up with me. Has there ever been a study exploring whether or not the effects of sleep deprivation can be impacted by these mindset effects? Because over the years, I keep learning more and more about how much sleep I need, and I've really emphasized sleep, and I do feel much better when I'm getting it. But as new parents know, or students know, or athletes know, or anyone that lives a normal life finds sometimes that they don't get a good night's sleep, would believing that we can tolerate that and push through it and function just fine, and that it's not going to kill us or give us Alzheimer's, could that help us deal with a poor night's sleep, or even two, or chronic sleep deprivation?
Certainly, I would guess. There's been one study, to my knowledge, that's tested that. Dragonaw and colleagues, and they had people come in and they gave them sort of I think it was a sham sort of EEG test to sort of figure out how this was done a number of years ago. Now we actually have, devices to test this, but theirs was this sham test, and then they gave people fake feedback about the quality of their sleep and, how it had been the night before. And they also asked the participants how they felt about their sleep. And essentially what they found was that this sham feedback, if they were told that they had gotten lower quality sleep, led to deficits in a variety of cognitive tasks. And that was sort of decoupled from their actual, qualities of sleep, at least as self-reported. So that's one study that attests to this. I think certainly, I would bet a lot of money, I haven't run these myself, but that your mindsets can push around your, cognitive functioning, physiological effects of sleep. But once again, it's not all or nothing, right? There are real important benefits of sleep, and how far we can push around that through our mindset is an open question.
The result that you mentioned is really interesting, because a lot of people use these sleep trackers now. They're using rings or wristbands. In fact, my lab has worked pretty closely with a company. They supplied us data on how well people are sleeping, and you get a score. People get the score back, and when they see that score, they might think based on these results, my sleep score was poor. I shouldn't expect much from myself today, or it makes sense that my memory would be going. For this reason, and I'll probably lose a few friends for saying this, but hopefully I'll gain a few as well. That's why I like to just do a subjective score for myself. If I wake up in the morning, I just decide, okay, did I sleep well or not? I don't like seeing a number. I don't like getting a readout from a device. That's me. I know a lot of people like it, and they can be very useful. But gosh, it seems that these belief effects are weaving in at all levels. I'd love for us to talk about stress, because your lab has worked extensively on this. And if you would, could you tell us at some point about the study that you've done about informing people about the different effects of stress, but also if there's an opportunity, some takeaways about how we could each conceptualize stress in ways that would make it serve us better as opposed to harm us and our mental and physical performance.
Great. Yeah. So I'd come off the heels of doing some research in exercise and diet and finding these provocative and also counterintuitive effects with respect to like how we should try to motivate people, right? Mm-hmm. And I was thinking about this and this, grouping of going from, medicines to saving us to behaviors to saving us, and how those behaviors might be influenced by mindsets. The obvious next thing to think about was stress, right? Because it's like, okay, well, you want to be healthier, fix your diet, fix your exercise, and stress less. And, so I started doing some digging into the nature of stress, and a couple things were clear. One was that the public health message was very clear, right? That stress was bad, right? Unmitigated and harmful on our health, our productivity, our relationships, our fertility, our cognition, you name it, right? The messages that were out there, by and large, oversimplified messages focused on the damaging consequences of stress. But as you know, if you actually dive deeper into the literature on stress and the origins of stress, what you find is that, the literature, like most literatures, is not so clear-cut. And in fact, there's a large amount of evidence to support the fact that the experience of stress, meaning encountering adversity or challenge in one's goal-related efforts, does not have to be debilitating. And in many cases, the body's response was designed to enhance our ability to manage at those moments, right? So some research showing that stress narrows our focus, increases our attention, speeds up the rate at which we're able to process information. There was some research out there showing this phenomenon of physiological toughening, the process by which the release of catabolic hormones in the stress response recruit or activate anabolic hormones, which help, as you know, build our muscles, build our neurons to help us grow and learn. And there was a whole body of emerging research on post-traumatic growth, or this phenomenon in which even the experience of the most traumatic stressors, the most chronic and enduring stressors, could lead not to destruction, but in fact to the exact opposite, to an enhanced sense of connection with our values, connection to others, sense of joy and passion for living. And so, I found that to be interesting. And, my work since then has been not to try to argue that stress is enhancing and not debilitating, but try to point out that the true nature of stress is a paradox. The true nature of stress is manifold and complex, and lots of things can happen. But to question what's the role of our mindset about stress in shaping our response to stress. So some work had already been done looking at your perception of the stressor, right? So do you view a stressor like a challenging exam or a health diagnosis as a challenge or a threat? And that had shown pretty convincingly that when you view stressors more as a challenge, less as a threat, that your brain and body responds more adaptively. What our question was to take the sort of psychological construal one step higher in abstraction, so not just the stressor, but the nature of stress, right? Do you at that core level, do you view stress as something that's bad, is going to kill us, and therefore should be avoided? Or do you view stress as natural and something that's going to enhance us? And so we set out to design a series of studies to test the extent to which these mindsets about stress mattered. This again was with Peter Salovey and Sean Aker originally. We designed a measure to test people's mindsets about stress, simple questions like, what extent do you believe or agree or disagree with statements like, stress enhances my performance and productivity, stress heightens my vitality and growth, things like that. And we found in a number of correlational studies that more enhancing stress mindset was linked to better health outcomes, better well-being, and higher performance. So then we set out to see if we could change people's mindsets. And in our first test of this, we decided to do so by creating these multimedia films that showcased research, anecdotes, facts about stress, all true, but oriented towards one mindset or the other, right? So you can imagine one set of films showed basically the messages that were out there in the public health context. The other showed, hey, stress has been linked to these things, but in fact, the body stress response was designed to do this. Did you know it could do that? And we had empowering images like LeBron James making the free throw in the final minute versus missing it, right? So all of these things are true, possibilities, but oriented to two different mindsets about stress.
So either people saw a video that basically made it seem like stress will diminish you, crush you, reduce you, yes, or a video very similar, stress will grow you, bring out your best, and maybe even take you to heightened levels of performance that you've never experienced before.
Exactly. So examples in the sports, we also had like true leaders emerge in the moments of greatest stress, Churchill. And so all those examples are out there for both the enhancing nature and the debilitating nature. And our question was, does orienting people to different mindsets change how they respond to stress? So this study was done in the wake of the 2008 financial crisis. We worked with UBS, a financial service company that was undergoing pretty massive amounts of layoffs. So these employees were stressed about being laid off. They were taking on more pressure. It was just a tough time. And we randomized them into 3 conditions. And this was all pre-work before getting a training on stress. But the 3 different conditions, some watched no videos, some watched the stress will crush you videos, and some watched the stress could enhance you videos. And what we found was that it was a total of 9 minutes of videos over the course of the week led to changes in their mindsets about stress, which led to changes in their physiological symptoms associated with stress. So people who watched the enhancing films had fewer backaches, muscle tension, insomnia, racing heart, and so forth. And they also reported performing better at work compared to those who watched the debilitating videos. Now, interestingly, we didn't make anyone worse with the debilitating videos, which was good. We had told that the IRB we didn't expect that because that message was already out there. That's what they were already seeing. That wasn't new to them. It was more this enhancing perspective that turned out to be inspiring.
I love that study, and I know we both have friends and ties in the special operations community through just sort of happenstance, and we can maybe we'll get into that a little later. But a good friend from that community always says, there are only 3 ways to go through life at any moment, which is either back on your heels, flat-footed, or forward center of mass. And I said, well, what's the key to forward center of mass? And he said, stress is what places you in forward center of mass, meaning leaning forward and into challenge. And I know that you've actually looked at that community, and it does really seem like that's a mindset that either they have going in or that they cultivate through the course of their training. But this notion that stress is what puts us in forward motion is true physiologically, right? I mean, adrenaline's major role is to place us into a moment of, or to bias us towards action. That's why we tremble. We're the body trying to initiate action. But actually, this is probably a good opportunity if there's anything interesting to extract from the study on SEAL teams. What was it?
Yeah, no, I loved working with the SEALs. one of the interesting things we found, so we've studied this, measured this mindset in several different populations. And in every single one that we had tested so far, the average had been on the debilitating side of the scale.
People just saying stress is bad.
Stress is bad, right? And, it's like with measures of growth and fixed mindsets about intelligence, people are in the middle, but oftentimes have a more positive mindsets about intelligence. That was not the case with stress. It's still not the case. I'm trying to get the message out there, except for this group of Navy SEALs.